okay now? Okay. I'm breathing. That's good. I'm ringing. I'm ringing.
There's a ringing.
There's a ringing. What can I do about the ringing? Pardon?
Sounds like feedback. They got to take care of it.
They got to take care of it back there. I have nothing to do with this. Nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. I think it's especially nice. I said I've got to get housekeeping things too. I don't have any conflict of interest. They told me that. I'm not making any money. Any brand names I mentioned today will be by accident. I don't have contracts with anybody. Secondly, depending on how good I am this morning, there will be a book signing next door. They told me I had to say that, and I will be available to. I always get embarrassed doing that, but so be it. There next door. Is that anything else? I wanted to thank the folks here for making the room very warm for when we've come in, because I know that makes it easier for all of us, right, at 8 o'clock in the morning to sit and listen to somebody drone on when the temperature is 95. So hopefully the air conditioning will come and we'll get going. All right. Day 2. You are the survivors of day 1. I didn't notice the excitement out there at like day 1. People sort of dragging themselves in here, so I appreciate you coming. You know me somewhat from John's introduction. I'm a clinical scientist, professor, clinician, worked at Emory for the last 36 years. Who are you now? Who survived? Who's here this second day? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you, I know, I can see you. We're very concrete this morning. It's okay. It's all right. We're going to go with concrete. How many of you are physicians? Great. Super. You're used to the hours, though. You're used to the hours. Yeah. 24 on, 24 off. Psychologists? Yes, okay. Sitting in small groups together for protection. Okay. Speech and language people? Yes, yes, yes. There you are. Okay. Speech and language people. Nurses? Nurses, bless you. Bless you for being here. Okay. Let's see. Oh, don't give it away. Teachers? Okay, you're all on that side mostly. You guys want to change over there? Okay. Who am I missing? Parent. I was going to ask for all people who had children who didn't fit in to raise their hands. Okay, thank you. Because it's not just the parents of autism spectrum kids or neurodevelopmental disorder kids that have kids that don't fit in. I mean, there's lots of others that don't fit in as well. Okay? All right, so there you are. There you are. Now, John didn't tell you that one of the reasons that coming to California is a difficult decision for me is because I cannot fly. I have an inner ear disorder, so if I'm going to get from point A to point B, I have to go by land or sea. So I came here via Amtrak. Huh? I survived Amtrak, I think. And what's always interesting to me when I talk at different places is that wherever I seem to go, the children that don't fit in are there ahead of me. And even though I took this long train ride across the country, when I got here they were again. They're everywhere. Children who don't fit in are everywhere. And what I wanted to start out this morning by doing was to read you an excerpt from an article that was written by Melissa Green. She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist who came to observe the work that Marshall Duke and I were doing down at Emory University. And she wrote an article, and she described what she called the left-out child. And I want to read that to you to sort of get us all on the same page with what it's like to be the left-out child. And she entitled the article, "The Difference Between No Friends and One Good Friend is Like the Difference Between a Pitch Black Room and One Lit by Candles." Preschool children in their shorts of many colors line up, wait, fidget, then are released onto their playground. Roaring boys waving sticks storm straight up silver inclines of slides. Girls who learned how to scream just last week do so, flipping their hair around as if windswept. There are ballerinas, knights, mermaids, and kittens, all prancing or thundering among the rows of neatly stacked rubber tires, across the sandbox, around the swings. The children are intoxicated, most of all by having friends. Inside the school building, little hands scoot out to save places on the floor for today's chum when the children sit cross-legged for music. As the brightly colored lids of the plastic lunch boxes are folded open, secret contents are shared. Chocolate goodies pass grubbily, hand to hand among buddies. But already, it can happen already. A few children are loping around the perimeter of the fun, on the playground, bewildered, not knowing which place to dash. At circle time, either too loud or too quiet, not catching what is funny or when it's funny. Or at lunchtime, swallowing dryly the packed ingredients from mom, lacking the knack for making swaps. In elementary school, there are older children having a more painful time of it, those mimicked by other children in line, just behind their backs, the children for whom others invent cruel and telling nicknames. Somehow their timing is only slightly off. They answer too quickly or too slowly when they are called on by the teacher or when they are in conversation with other kids. Or they walk just ahead or just behind the classmates trotting off somewhere. Or they laugh too soon or too late at a wisecrack. And in either case, it's clear that they truly don't get it. These are minor errors, perhaps, yet they signal children who are out of sync, who may be growing toward full-scale social unacceptability. They want to have friends and have a sense of friendships being formed all around them. They may try to take action. They may grab other kids, hug, stamp on feet, pull hair, pinch. And it's not all as aggressive as it seems. It's a sad grabbing for a piece of the intimacy that other children seem to give and take gracefully. The keenest and most far-reaching lessons of childhood are not those of textbook and blackboard, but the teaching of gym and cafeteria, playground and backyard, where we learn the social hierarchies. There will be, each year, a few golden children whose poise and timing and style are admired by the rest. There will be an inner circle of children chosen as friends by the most popular, the ones among whom phone calls are exchanged and sleepovers are planned. Another circle of acceptable extras will be required to fill out the larger parties, the softball games and the classroom hijinks. A few more kids will be tolerated at the fringe, allowed to look on, however longingly. And there will be, inevitably, a handful of kids of the lowest caste, the untouchables, whose very appearance among others is unacceptable, a source of embarrassment or unease to the rest. I think that's a beautiful way of a mother looking at kids and picking up the things that are important about fitting in and not fitting in. And I know most of you are interested in kids who don't fit in that are part of neurodevelopmental disorders or autism spectrum disorders, but they're everywhere. And kids who don't fit in, regardless of what the cause is, and the effects are pretty much the same. I did not begin my studies with looking at severely disturbed or autism spectrum disordered children. I began looking at typical kids. I was working with kids who seemed to be okay, but they could not make friends. And so I figured, well, it must be the parents. So you interview the parents, and it turns out the parents are nice. All the nerve. They're nice, they're caring, and they seem to be doing what they should be doing to have good kids. And then you figure, aha, it's not the kid, it's not the parent. Who is it? The teacher. Yeah, let's go see this teacher and you go meet the teacher, and she's as concerned as everybody else, and besides that, she's competent. So there you sit with this kid who wants to make friends, wants it badly, isn't doing it. Everybody who's important in this person's life wants to help and is good, and yet the child still doesn't fit in. And the why of that, trying to figure out the why of that, has governed my work for the past 30 years. I eventually moved from typical kids to severely disturbed kids, and I've served for the last 3 decades as the chief consultant to the public school programs in Atlanta and DeKalb County, and to the state program in Georgia for psychoeducational kids, which is a depository for all the kids that nobody else wants to have anything to do with. You know these kids, and you know the programs that try to deal with them. Lots of different diagnoses. And I've seen over the years these kids come in, and I say to myself, I've seen every conceivable type of symptom and disorder. Believe me, I have. And I've heard every conceivable explanation for why the kids don't fit in wherever they are. And I've seen so many interventions. Good people working hard. And the result of all that is that after 30-some years, there are more kids who don't fit in now than there are then. And you know that. You know that. It's the group of individuals who are increasing at a greater and greater rate for some reason that nobody knows, and people are conjecturing and studying and figuring out, especially within the autism spectrum, this group, why that is, why there are so many. When I was in graduate school, I drove 100 miles to the University of Wisconsin to see somebody behaviorally treating an autistic child, because it was such a rarity. All I need to do now, if I want to see an autistic child being treated, is go to the local school, because there they are. They're everywhere. And they're just part of the group of kids who don't fit in. When I began my work trying to help kids who don't fit in, I began it as a father. And I dealt with the problem as a father would. Stern. We're going to get this thing taken care of. I'm going to make all these kids who don't fit in, not just not fit in, they're going to be popular. They're going to be the prom king. I'm going to be like Garrison Keillor's, Lake Wobegon. They're all going to be above average. Everybody's going to be perfect. And damn it, if they don't, they don't do it, I'm going to will it to happen. And that drove my work. And it characterizes the work, I think, of people who are fathers and mothers and have children. Because that's what you do with your own children. You worry, you wonder, you push, you want them to be the best possible. Over 30 years, something wonderful has happened. I'm no longer just a father, I'm a grandfather. I have 2 grandchildren, Soren, who's 8 months old, and Hannah Ruth, who's 3. And I deal with the children now that don't fit in as a grandfather does. I'm much more accepting. I take the children where they are. I don't act with them like I want them to be somebody else. I want them to be who they are, and what I want to do in my work is I want to take them for where they are to the next step. And I want to take them on that step, and then I want to stop, and I want to celebrate that step with them. Okay? Difference. And you, depending on whether you're 20, 40, or 60, I think have to look at yourself and wonder and be aware of the way that you are thinking about the children you're dealing with, because I think you will find that you'll change when you're at different ages. One of the nuances, there's a lot of nuances between being a father and being a father and a mother, father and a grandfather. Okay? And let me tell you a little vignette about that might bring out some of these subtleties. Hannah Ruth and I spend a lot of time together. We just go places and we sit. Would I do that as a father with my son? No, we had to be baseball, we run. But Hannah Ruth and I we go to the park and we sit. And we're sitting at this park one day, watching the ducks and geese. And Hannah Ruth is very thoughtful. She was just sitting there. She had long blonde hair, curls all over the place. And she said, finally she turned to me and she looked and she said, "Papa, will you watch over me?" And I, thought, well, yes, sure, Hannah Ruth, I'll watch over you. It's an interesting way to put it, watch over me. And she thought for a little bit more, and then she said, "Papa, will you always watch over me?" Now, how you answer that question as a father and a grandfather, I think, is part of the nuanced difference. As a father, I would be thinking realistically. Well, I'll be such and such. You got to get a job. You got to, husband. You got to. As a grandfather, you say what I said. I'll always watch over you. I'll be there in your heart, and I'll be there in your head whenever you need me. Hannah Ruth said nothing, but she put her head on my shoulder, and we were together again for a little while. And it's those sort of events that change a person for the rest of their life. And you have those as a grandfather. I have them more often as a grandfather than I did as a father. So when I realized it, as I was taking my long train trip, going through some really, really boring places on Amtrak, that the contract I have with Hannah Ruth is the same one I have with the kids who don't fit in. I will accept them. I will be there for them. I will celebrate who they are, and I will try to get them from where they are to the next step they want to be, and I want to celebrate that step. Okay. So let's get to the matter. What do all the kids who don't fit in have in common? It's very hard to find one thing that they all share. But the one thing that they all share is that they are not good at relating. They cannot form relationships. How important is this? To me, it's the most important thing. I don't think we do anything more important as human beings than to form relationships. And these are kids that can't do it. Okay? How important are relationships? If you answer yes to the question, are you in a good relationship with one other parent? You will live 8 years longer than if you answer no. If you have open heart surgery and you answer no to the question, do you draw strength from at least one other person? Your chances of dying as a result of the surgery are 7 times greater. One of the best predictors of adult psychopathology is whether or not kids relate well as children. If children are rejected or neglected as part of the sociometric makeup, that's the best single predictor of whether they're going to have adult psychopathology. Michael Rutter, Sir Michael Rutter now, in England, the world's probably most eminent, preeminent psychiatrist, studies resilient kids. Kids, in essence, who are in various places, shouldn't do good. They live in poverty, but they make it. And he studied them in London, and Bombay, and New York, and every place in the world. And he finds that there's one thing common to all these people that are resilient. That one thing is what?
Relationship.
Yeah. That if they have one good relationship with an adult. It doesn't have to be the parent. That seems to be the thing that demarcates them from all other kids who don't make it. One adult relationship. So, if you buy for the minute with me that relationships are important, how are we doing on relationships? Huh? How are we doing with it? We doing good? Relationships are going swell, right? Then how come 1 out of every 2 marriages ends in divorce? How come there's more kinds of abuse now than they've got categories of abuse that we didn't even know existed 30 years ago? Spouse abuse, child abuse, elder abuse, relationships. They just finished a survey CDC did in Atlanta of high school kids. And they found that high school students end up having prolonged periods of loneliness, sadness, and feeling apart from others that Latinos of all groups experience that the most, and that's 1 out of every 3 children. 33%. 1 out of every 3 kids feels lonely, depressed. African American and white students follow closely behind. In the CDC survey, it was found that 1 out of every 10 students, 1 out of every 10 admitted to attempting suicide. Okay? To me, that's evidence, because suicide, to me, I've worked with our suicide prevention groups at Emory and other places, is the ultimate sort of answer to feeling apart from others. So, all this work, all these people worrying, we got more kids who don't fit in, relationships are in shambles. Why is that? That's the question I've been working on. And the thing is, in the 30 years that I've been working in this area, there's been lots written about this stuff, right? I mean, I went to the bookstore yesterday, right, and they've got, well, when I was 21, when I was in college, there were 2 books you could read, 2 self-help books, right? Anybody remember what they are? Norman Vincent Peale, Influence People, and then Billy Graham, okay? The other self-help books were like behind the plastic screen that they used to have for the X-rated videos. You know, you look around and go hide in there and read quick. Now you go to the bookstore and they have aisle 1, men who love women who hate women who love shoes. Aisle 2, you know, I'm your brother, I'm your father, I'm your cousin, I'm your aunt. People have written volumes. There are, 100 more journals. I mean, to try to keep up with the research and so on and so on. And the problem's worse. There are probably lots of reasons why, but I think one significant reason why is that we're not focusing on the right stuff. And what I want to try to talk to you this morning about is one thing I think that we ought to focus on if we want to make relationships work, if we want kids to do what they should do, to be happy individuals, as happy as they can be. Okay, but to do that, first we have to do a little primer on relationships, at least the way I look at relationships. As I was saying, I worked hours on this particular slide. I was completely exhausted when I finished. And somebody noticed that the way this is going on the screen, it's like Star Wars. It's like, and Darth Vader is a long time ago, in a long place, another planet. we need to talk about relationships. And relationships, to me, go through a series of phases. Choice, beginning, deepening, and ending. And what I want you to do is to think about all the kids that you deal with and all the relationships you have and see how it fits this model. Okay? One of the truths of this model is that the earlier in this process you have problems, the more devastating the outcomes. So if you have individuals that cannot do choice, who's there? Who has trouble either choosing not to relate or not having that choice taken away from them? Who are we talking about? Who? Autism. Autism, if you read the definition, is the ultimate relationship disorder. But we have other folks there too. Schizophrenia, depression. So that if we have trouble at the choice phase, it's going to make it harder for the rest of the things to get done. Okay? Once you choose to relate, you then have to begin a relationship. And kids and adults and people may have problems here. If they do, it's going to be more severe than if they have problems at the succeeding 2 stages. Okay? And we all know what's interesting to me is that relationships, which I think are the most important thing in the world, and some of you may agree with me, we get no help in how to do it. Who here has taken a series of courses on relationships? One? We got one person. After a talk is done, you'll be seeing these people, 100 people at a time. But we're not taught how to do these things. The only part of this process we're taught is the beginning phase. And we begin things all the same, right? What do we do when we meet somebody? I've seen you guys out there. What do you do? What do you do? First you smile. Then you shake hands. You say, "Hi, Steve Nowicki, Emory University. How are you?" And then what do you do? These aren't hard questions. I'm not giving you hard questions. People are looking, saying, "What do I do?" It's 8:45 on Friday. We're not going to have hard questions. What do? You make small talk. What? The weather. Oh, Sacramento, so hot. If I talk one more minute about how hot Sacramento is, you think your head's going to burst from talking about it. But I've had training because I've been in England a great deal, and in England you can talk about the weather forever. Okay? It's so beastly hot. It's so hot. You should have been here last May. It would have been twice tonight. You make small talk. Do you have kids that don't know how to begin relationships? Okay? I think all efforts ought to be made to teach kids how to begin a relationship. I think that's one of the crucial, most important things you can do with children that don't fit in. Okay? And I remember the places that I consult at, they taught a child how to begin. This is getting a little ahead because it's giving you the answer. But I remember Gregory's 6'4", some kind of autism spectrum person. I don't do much for diagnosis. I'm not much into diagnosis. I'm much more for looking at strengths and weaknesses. But he had lots of problems. 6'4", they taught him how to say the things you should say when you meet somebody. "Hi, Dr. Nowicki, how are you?" Okay, so they taught him to do this. And so when I walked into the school that day, 6'4", Gregory came to me, stood right here, and said, "Hi, Dr. Nowicki, how are you today?" And I said, "Well, Gregory, I'm fine. But if you take one step back, I'll be even better." And then I taught him the idea that you stand one arm's length away from somebody when you talk. But the folks that taught him about beginning didn't teach him that. And he needed to practice that over and over and over again. Okay, so beginnings, we get some help there. Deepening, okay, now we can join in and relate. Some of us have problems deepening. Most of the folks that I see in therapy as a therapist have trouble deepening relationships. They have lots of friends, lots of acquaintances. Women describe guys that they've dated that they do great first dates, you know, and so they go ready for the second date, and that second date is same thing as the first date, because they do great first dates, and that's all they do, and pretty soon they're not answering the phone anymore, you know, for dates. How we get from beginning an acquaintanceship to deeper friendships, there's a question. And if I asked you how you do that, you'd come up with something. But the answer is, even with all the bright people we have in this room, we don't know. Those of us who have friends, we got friends. So we don't think about it. It's only when somebody comes to you and says, well, how do you make a friend? I remember consulting at a Montessori school, and it was winter. Picture is winter, gray Atlanta, drizzly skies. And the car stopped, and I was standing outside with the principal watching the cars come in, and the car door opened. The mom came around. She opened the door for her little daughter to get out. Her little daughter had like a snowsuit on like they wear in northern Wisconsin, even though it was only 40 degrees. And the little girl was standing like this, and Mama said, go make friends. And she got back in the car, and the vision I have is here's this little girl standing there thinking, well, how do you do that? How do you go make friends? How do you get to be part of a group? What do you talk about? What do you do? So the deepening, the moving from the beginning to the deepening phase of a relationship is very, very important. I mean, think about it. You meet on average 50,000 people in your lifetime. Okay? I've not checked on this. That's what somebody estimated this. It may be 49,400. Around 50,000. Think of it. What makes the difference for the friends that you have, which are usually a handful? I mean, if you're really good, true friends, a handful. Why did they make it to be your friends while the other 49,995 didn't? Therein is the problem and the answer as well. So, deepening. We have to learn how to deepen. Ending. Here's something we can share with all the kids that don't fit in and the adults that don't fit in. Because we all have problems ending. We don't like endings. Ending isn't fun. Saying goodbye isn't good. So in the United States, we do endings basically two ways. Anybody got to guess what we do when we get ending? We get busy, really, really busy, and we get angry. That's how we end. So all of you who have kids in school that don't fit in, when they're getting ready to end the school year, they will get angry. And so will the teachers. Because that's better to end that way than to leave something good. So you got to watch for that. Ending is a very important phase of the relationship. In fact, I think it's the most important phase, because it's only when the relationship is ended that you can look back over what you did and find out what you did right and what you did wrong, so that you can then begin the next set of relationships better. Okay? Every school program, and this is for the teachers, no disrespect to anybody else in this room and what they do for kids and so on. Teachers are my favorite group of people to talk to. They get this. They get what I'm talking about, because they see the kids in social situations more than anybody else in the world. And when we start talking about kids who don't fit in and why they might not fit in, they understand that. Plus, they have a constructed choice, beginning, deepening, and ending relationship with children every academic year. They know how many days are left and when the end will come. To the programs I consult with, we begin ending 8 weeks before the end of the school term. I tell the teachers, stop trying to teach math. Teach the child about how to end. Let the child get angry. Let them express. Put the number. I teach a course, a seminar on relationships at Emory University. It's my favorite course. I've taught it for 20 years. I take 15 second semester seniors. And the course is called Empirical and Experiential Aspects of, that's for the dean. What we do, and we read the research and we do the research because I do a lot of research, but to me the key is the experiential part. I challenge these students to end their time, their college time, in a way that it is a gift to them when they're 30, 40, 50. And of course, second, I'll come in, all bright, shiny faces. Oh, I love this. We're going to talk deeper. And so each class time, I put how many days are left till graduation. And I ask, what have you done this week to end well? And you'd be surprised halfway through the semester what that class looks like. I have 15 angry students. As soon as I start putting the number up there, they say, we know how many days are left. I said, well, let me just put it down here. I have a line that says, here's when you start it, here's your start, here's how much time you have left. What have you done to end? And the excuses they come up with about, well, I don't need to talk to this person. They know that I care for them. And I say to them, deal with these people as though you're never going to see them again for the rest of your life. What would you want to say to them? Why do you keep things inside? Why do you complain so easily and say good things so frugally? And that's the battle, because that ending phase is difficult for us. But I urge you, especially with kids who don't fit in, they need to know about how they're doing. They need feedback. The title of the book, first book I wrote, was Helping the Child Who Doesn't Fit In. I had mothers come up to me and fathers come up to me when the book first came out that said, why did you title the book like that? My son found it and he was upset. I said to the moms and dads, if he doesn't know he doesn't fit in, that's part of the problem. He's got to be aware of it. You've got to be able to help the child look at things from ending back to beginning. Okay? Choice. I have that up there because I'm very cleverly point out that relationships continue to cycle. And I'll just leave this for you. I do a talk on adult relationships and how they go through a process of about every 5 to 7 years going through a choice, beginning, deepening, and ending process, even when you're in the same relationship with the person. So the idea of finding the person you always wanted to be with for the rest of your life and then skiing in the down position to the end ain't the way it works. Okay? About every 5 to 7 years, you're going to go through an ending process where you're going to question each other, wonder if this relationship really means anything. It will change. And what you learn in that time period about what you did in that 5 to 7 years is going to help you make the transition. Sometimes there are events that occur. Birth of a first child. First child. Do you remember what your relationship was like before you had your first child? Vaguely. Vaguely, if you're like me. It's like those 5 years were compressed into about a month and a half, and then Andy was there. And the relationship ended that I had, and I chose to begin it again. My wife decided at age 50 that she wanted to be a minister. Oh boy. I'm getting ready to buy my trailer to drive cross country because I'm closing down. I'm looking to end my career and so on, and she's just starting. Not only that, I'm Roman Catholic. And so I'm sitting as a Roman Catholic with my Protestant minister wife at teas and things. Our relationship, before she decided to do that, ended. And I had to look over that, and we had to look over that and choose to begin this other relationship and so on. so that even good relationships will continue to go through that kind of cycle. Okay? That's covering so much work. All right. Now, I would ordinarily ask, are there any questions? But let's move ahead. And now, how do you get from one phase of the relationship to the next? You communicate. And all the books I talked to you about, the ones that are written down aisle 6 and aisle 7, all have to do with verbal communication. The way you say things, the words you use, and so on. I think that the major mistake or the major lack of emphasis that contributes to the children who don't fit in is the fact that we do not emphasize nonverbal communication as much. I believe that nonverbal communication is the language of relationship. If we're good at it, we'll have good relationships, and if we're not good at it, we won't. Okay? And if you read the definition of autism, it is the ultimate nonverbal disorder. Okay? These are kids who cannot do nonverbal, and that's why they have so much problem. By nonverbal communication, I mean nonverbal socially refers to all those human responses not described in words. Okay? Everything that communicates except for the words. This means facial expressions, prosody, the language that you use, body movements, these things, gestures, touching, proxemics, personal space. Okay? Those are all kinds of nonverbal communication. A long time ago, a man by the name of Edwin Sapir wrote what I thought was the ultimate quote. This is something professors are always trying to find in their life, the ultimate quote that will live beyond them. He did, nonverbal behavior, nonverbal communication is sent in accordance with an elaborate and secret code that is written nowhere, known by none, and understood by all. Isn't that, yeah, see, you're affected. It's completely wrong. Everything in that statement is wrong. But I just wanted to show you that it was very beautiful. And if you stick with me, I'll show you how I've rewritten it. All right, let's talk about the similarities and differences between verbal and nonverbal communication. Nonverbal and verbal communication are both organized sign systems that are used in social interaction. And nobody gives me any trouble with that. They're signs. Words are signs. Gestures are signs. Facial expressions are signs that we use in communication. Both nonverbal and verbal communication are learned. Certainly there are biological contributors to this, brain-based contributions that go into this. But they're both basically learned. They have to learn this stuff. It has to be taught to them. Verbal and nonverbal communication are both complex. English language is one of the most complex languages on earth. It has over 100,000 words, almost twice as many as French and German. All you have to do is pick up a copy of James Joyce and try to read the first paragraph, and you realize how complex the words can be. But so is nonverbal communication. There are over 5,000 different gestures that have been noted. There's a man by the name, and Paul Ekman has been finding, 5,500 different smiles that people have. There's a man by the name of Mario Pei, P-E-I, who estimates that there are 750,000 different discriminable nonverbal signs. Okay? Well, who's going to check on them? I mean, I'm not checking on them. Just assume that there's a lot. Okay? Nonverbal and verbal communication both have receptive and expressive deficits. Okay? So that if somebody has trouble verbally with letters and words, and it mixes them up and they're called dyslexic. Okay, we know that. If I show you this right here and you can tell me this is a thumb, these are fingers, but you cannot, no matter what, come up with a word for what this is. What are you? Maybe expressive aphasic. So you can have receptive verbal difficulties, dyslexia. You can have expressive deficits, verbally, aphasias, and so on. But likewise, there can be verbal, nonverbal, receptive, and expressive difficulties. You can have people that cannot read the cues from others, and you can have people that express the wrong cues. They think they're sending one set of messages nonverbally, and they're sending something else. Okay? So, we got tired, Marshall Duke and I, of constantly saying, you know, nonverbal social processing deficits and such, and so we coined a word called dysemia. Dys, an inability, semia, signs, an inability to process signs. And so we talk about a receptive facial dysemia or an expressive facial dysemia. What's an expressive facial dysemia? I don't know if you can see that. That's Ed Sullivan. Happy, sad, angry, fearful, a myriad of different emotions. You can have, this is one of my favorites for somebody helping out somebody who might have a receptive problem. He wants to catch all those dysemic individuals who can't read the signs correctly, so he gives them a verbal message, I really look sad. Okay. Verbal and nonverbal communication both are similar in that they are developmental and conversational. When you meet somebody, there is a developmental way that you use your words and your nonverbal actions. When you talk to a baby, how do you talk to the baby? Do you say, Steve Nowicki, Emory University? What do you do? What do you do? You get down like this and you go, hi, how are you? You're a nutcase. You're absolutely, any place else you do that, go to a restaurant and go, hi. Out you go. But it's appropriate at that place. It's appropriate at that place, and you have, in essence, a developmental timeline, and you need to be aware of that. And that's to help the child learn more about what the nonverbal signals are as well. I just want to also remind you that you can be, I mean, we can talk about people who are bilingual. And there are some Americans who are bilingual or multilingual. Not many, but some. Okay? But there are very few Americans who are bikinesic. That is, when they speak the language of another, a verbal language of another group, they keep the American nonverbals. Everything is John Wayne, you know, V. Gates, you know. I have a Dutch professor at Emory who's a friend of mine, a very well-known researcher in primatology. He's Dutch. When he speaks Italian, his body language changes. When he speaks German, he stands like that. It changes with the language. Okay? So keep that in mind. But one of the important messages I want to leave you with here is that there are differences between verbal and nonverbal communication, and they make all the difference. First of all, nonverbal communication is more continuous and cannot easily be stopped, while verbal communication is more discrete and can be stopped at will. You can't stop communicating with me nonverbally, and I can't stop being affected by it. Go ahead, try and stop. You can't, can you? I'm sensitive to every nuance, every change of shape, everybody, and there's been some very nice people who are sitting up close here who have been trying very hard not to communicate that they're tired. They've done the famous stifled yawn, this one here. And I do appreciate that. I do appreciate that. Okay? But the key thing here is, remember, you cannot shut this down. This is going on all the time. Nonverbal communication takes place more out of awareness than does verbal communication. Until I make you aware of what you're communicating nonverbally, you're not aware of it. And neither am I until I make myself. It's a very hard thing to keep in awareness. Okay? So it's going on continuously, and it's out of our awareness. Why that is, I'm not sure, but it is out of our awareness. Three, nonverbal communication errors have a negative emotional impact, while verbal communication errors have a negative intellectual impact. If I can find my papers here, I will try to show this to you. We're almost there. Talk quietly amongst yourselves just for a minute or two. Is it there? Is it there? Okay. Excellent. If I was over here in a conversation in a coffee shop yesterday and the person said, I ain't going to go there no more. Okay? I listened to that. What did I think of a person like that? Not very smart, maybe, well, maybe not educated. Okay? So when you make verbal errors, it has an intellectual impact. And a place to really look for nonverbal errors is in church bulletins. Okay? It's a good thing to keep you awake because you look at that, and here's for instance, here's some. I have a list of 200 of these, but let me give you 3. First of all, Easter service will be at 10 a.m. Mrs. Markham will lay an egg on the altar. Baptism will be held at the 11 a.m. service. Babies will be baptized at both ends. And this gets you through the services. It gets, my forever favorite one is, the New Mothers Club will meet next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Anyone wanting to be a new mother, please meet with the pastor in his office. Isn't that super? So when you make verbal errors, you get that kind of response. When you break a nonverbal error, when you make a nonverbal error, it almost always has a negative emotional impact. Okay? Very important. Continuous, out of awareness, has a negative emotional impact. For instance, my wife is always trying to get me to do more couth. Okay, because I'm a professor, for heaven's sakes, you know, I need to go see the opera or whatever. So I usually fight most of it, but she gets me, she says, I've seen this movie, Farini's Nose. It's 3 hours, a movie about different looks at Farini's nose from the bottom, from the up, and it's very existential, a lot of meaning. So I go to the Tara Theater, the art theater in Atlanta. I get my popcorn and my Coca-Cola, and I walk into the theater, and it's the usual crowd. 400 seats, 5 people. So I sit, I get my seat, and I have my Coke, and I'm sitting there. I look over my shoulder, and somebody comes into the theater, looks around, walks down the aisle, gets to my row, and sits down next to me. 400 empty seats. Okay? What do you feel? What do you feel? Invasion, anxious. How long before you go to the restroom? 30 seconds. And then from the restroom over to the car and home. Why? Because the person broke a nonverbal rule of language. And if you break a nonverbal rule of language, it almost always has a negative emotional impact. Put these 3 things together, and what you have is somebody who's negatively impacting on others emotionally, doing it continuously, and isn't aware of it. And how many people have broken those rules with you, stood too close, stared too long, and how many of those people have you ever given feedback to that says, you're doing this wrong? You don't. You just quickly exit stage left, and the person never knows how good they are. We know from studies we've done at Emory that people overestimate their nonverbal ability. They think they're better than they are. Okay? I've got 5 more minutes. Let me mention this couple. Nonverbal communication is learned indirectly and formally, while verbal communication is learned directly and formally. We learn our verbal communication directly in schools and formal lessons, etc., etc. Nonverbal, you pick up. Think if we turn the education process around the other way. And we just, whatever you can pick up verbally, you pick up somewhere along the line. Okay? That's why one of the things I urge, especially with kids from the autism spectrum disorder, is that they be taught nonverbal language skills directly. They be taught it like a course, and that course be repeated each year of their life while they're in school. Okay? I'll talk more about that in my afternoon session for those folks that come to that. When nonverbal and verbal messages disagree in emotional meaning, we tend to believe the nonverbal. Example of this, George in Seinfeld was eating a grapefruit. In one of the episodes, the grapefruit went up, squirted him in the eye. Went like this with his eye all the time. Went to his office. The big boss came in and said, how's your manager? How do you like your manager? George says, I think he's great. I think he's terrific. And the big boss said, I understand. And so the whole episode was George going someplace, saying one thing with his words, going like this, and changing the meaning directly. Whenever we are posed with a problem where the verbal stuff says one thing and the nonverbal stuff says another, we always believe the nonverbal. Okay. One more thing. I cannot find that thing. Where is that thing? Well, we're gonna find it, because I do want to read you this thing about. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for helping me. I wanted to read this thing about the family, but I cannot get it. No, what I want to try to do is to read you a poem. I want to read you a very nice poem. And here it is. This is a poem written by my colleague Marshall Duke, and it's about nonverbal communication. It's silly, but it's okay to be silly, I think. Oh, the friendships you will find. There once lived a group of quite funny small birds who talked to each other but never used words. The birds called themselves spoke only in signs. They dwelt in the mountains and dug diamond mines. They dug diamonds by day and dug diamonds by night, and whenever they found one, they screeched with delight. They didn't say whoopee or hey, ain't this fine. All of their feelings were told with a sign. One Semmer was special, I think you'll agree. This Semmer could read every sign that she'd see. She'd read things in gestures, in sounds, and in faces. She learned about others in all kinds of places. The special sign reader, her name was Gwen, had a twin brother, we'll call him Glenn. But Glenn was not able to see things as well. What the signs of the Semmer said, he couldn't tell. When Gwen was off playing and chatting away, Glenn was quite lonely, hunting diamonds all day. Glenn had few friends, though truly he tried. He felt hurt, he felt helpless. Quite often he cried. Their parents were puzzled, both kids were bright, and to see Glenn so sad left them tossing at night. What could it be, they asked one another. What's in Glenn's sister that's not in Gwen's brother? They seemed at a loss, but then out of the blue flew a Semmer from Pittsburgh, one easy to do. I'll tell you what's wrong, he said without words. Glenn can't speak the language used by us birds. We speak in postures and gestures and faces, things that we say in all kinds of places, in a shift of our voice and a touch of a feather, in a smile that is bright in all kinds of weather. If it's only through words that Glenn tries to relate, it's no wonder he struggles to find a playmate. It's good Glenn knows words, but he must know signs too. I'll teach him so that they are easy to do. Glenn needs to watch faces, to watch people's eyes, to know someone sad before someone cries, to recognize happy and frightened and mad. To know Glenn can do this will make his friends glad. Take Gwen, for example. She always reads faces, at school, at home, or at bird-feeding places. She knows what she sees and then what to say, and so Gwen's a big favorite when time comes to play. The faces of others can say lots of stuff, but faces alone are not just enough. Birds also use gestures and postures and sound. You've got to know these if you're good friendship bound. Semmer talk uses our arms, hands, and fingers. These speak even louder than loud opera singers. We say, come on with me, with a hand-curling motion. Pointing a finger can cause quite a commotion. We play hearts and flowers with fake violins. Rubbing a finger brings on shame for our sins. We don't need loud words from small traffic cops. He raises his hand is enough to get big cars to stop. And watch how we sit when we're paying attention. Postures that speak are too numerous to mention. Head in your hands, interest is lacking. Slouch in your chair, you better start packing. Walking upright, bring on the day. Moping along, how much that can say. Steps that are perky, I'm ready to play. Feet that are dragging, others just walk away. And speaking of sounds that can speak, give a listen. If you don't read voice tones, there's so much you're missing. And are not just words, but conversing without them is not for us birds. And words like you slime ball can signal displeasure. But said with a warm tone, they can mean you're my treasure. Or said with some shock, they can mean, why, how dare you? But when said with strong anger, they really can scare you. Glenn listened carefully, heard every word. He wanted to learn how to act bird to bird. He started to practice and use more bird signs. He tried them out down in the dark diamond mines. But there in the mines, in that small dingy place, he had to learn also about how to use space. Could not stand too close, his friends backed away. Could not stand too far, or else he'd cause great dismay. And talk about touching, what strict rules apply. Rules that say who, what, where, when, yes, and why. And adding to troubles with touch and space, there still was some sign that Glenn had to face. Though basically feathers are feathers, you know. The way that we groom them is part of our show. A bird bath each day, a shiny, clean beak, all these can help to find friends that we seek. All of us don't have to dress just the same. A bit of ourselves must shine through in this game. But Semmers have rules about how they must look, and like all Semmers signs, they're not found in a book. Gwen simply learned signs from looking around. Glenn needed some help for his sign sets were found. Semmer kids learned them in all kinds of ways, some after school, others during school days. But signs must be learned if you're going to relate. Signs first find us friends and later a mate. They increase our hellos and reduce our goodbyes. So start seeing with your ears and listening with your eyes. Thank you. Sorry, it's such a mess.
The UC Davis Mind Institute began in 1998 with a promise to find cures for neurodevelopmental disorders. Every day, our physicians and researchers come closer to fulfilling that promise. Their groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, learning disabilities, and other brain disorders is helping children achieve their fullest potential. Please call or visit our website to find out more about current studies, our research team, and upcoming events.